Part of the work we're doing is researching the people who are featured in the plates, and we found some very interesting characters. One of these is Lionel Greenstreet, who was the first officer on Ernest Shackleton's expedition to the Antarctic between 1914 and 1917. He's interesting because he also kept his dogs in kennels locally at Hackbridge, so he had a really strong local connection. Oscar Pern, documented on the envelopes as Dr. Pern, is an interesting character. When we first opened the envelope, we found a man in fancy dress, which was very unexpected. As it turns out, he was Chief Medical Officer at the Horton Mental Institution in Epsom. Here he is pictured up here. Some of the images we have are of children. Lieutenant Gashien is one of those. He's photographed at about 10 years old. Sadly, the research we have done discovers that he was killed in the Battle of Vimy Ridge in around 1917. Rose Letitia Barclay is a World War I VAD nurse. We don't know much about her personally, but she has a very interesting backstory, and we found out a lot about her family from online newspaper articles from New Zealand.
There's a story we haven't published in the blog. It's about a young man who grew up in Surrey, but in the early 1900s he went to Canada, where he became a cowpuncher. Now, a cowpuncher is a cowboy. And someone said to me, why would he want to go to Canada to become a cowboy? And my answer to that is, what young Edwardian man wouldn't want to go to Canada and be a cowboy? But he signed up at the beginning of World War I, and he came back to the UK, and that's how we've got a photograph of him.
So the majority of our plates are individual studio portraits, but occasionally we get some really beautiful family groups. This one would still have been shot inside the studio. The same props come up again and again. So this stool that the lady is sitting on here is a familiar prop in the portraits that he does. But that's just a lovely family group. It's unusual for the time. Often the men were away at war, and it wouldn't have been possible to get a family group like this. So that's unusual and a lovely thing to have. So this plate here is King's College for Women, photographed in 1911. You can see it has some damage. The emulsion is peeling here on the bottom and the sides. But because it's an interesting and important plate of the period, we are going to digitise it carefully before it then gets sent out for conservation later on. This is one of my favourite images. We don't know who the ladies are yet, they haven't yet been researched, but it's shot in a beautiful Edwardian interior, and you can see 3 generations of women photographed together, which I just think is very special, and it gives a real indication of the times, having the interior there as well. Knights-Whittome shot a number of schools and institutions. So this is an institution called St Joseph's in Brook Green, and it simply says training kitchen. We don't have any more information than that, but hopefully we should be able to find out something about the institution with that amount of information. Again, it's a really interesting shot showing a kitchen of the time. The bread and butter of Knights-Whittome's business would have been studio portraits like this. He took a huge number of soldiers in uniform during World War I. These would have been generally soldiers from the university and public service brigades that were posted to the Woodcote camp in Epsom. So we find there are men here from all over Britain. This is Mr. Fidiment, who was photographed in 1907 by Knights-Whittome. You can see just from looking at the plate that he looks like a very genial older man. It's not until you actually look at the digitised scan, see it online, that you can actually see that he's very much a manual worker. There's dirt in the lines on his hands. The edges of his suit are very worn. He's wearing a beautiful pipe-shaped tie-pin, and it really makes you wonder. We don't know who this man is. There were 2 men with the same name living in the area at the time, and we're not sure which one he could be. But it really makes you wonder about the kind of lifestyle this person would have had, and why and how they could have afforded to come and have a studio portrait taken. So this is one of the very many pets that we have in the collection. Surprisingly, it seems a number of people bought their dogs and cats to be photographed by Knights-Whittome. Understandably, a lot of them are quite blurry. Even though the exposure times for these dry plates were less than a second, it's still very slow compared to exposure times today. And cats and dogs don't tend to sit still for very long. So these are among the poorer quality plates we have, but some of the most fun. This is Lieutenant Lionel Greenstreet, first officer on Shackleton's Antarctic expedition. Here he is photographed in 1917. This little girl is simply written down as Little Girl Guise. There's a series of this particular child. Often you find families come in and there's a series of every different child from the family, photographed in a very familiar chair with a very familiar background. This is a standard pose for one of Knights-Whittome's children's photographs, but they're all very charming.
These are prints that Knights-Whittome himself printed up, and as you can see, he was a bit of a recycler. So on the one side, we've got the interior of quite a stately home, and on the other side, a family. Now, this might be the same property, but we can't be sure, and we haven't found the plates for these yet. This could be Cheam School, we're not sure. We do know he photographed Cheam School, but obviously it's a football team. And on the other side, definitely not Cheam School. This could possibly be the headquarters of Norwich Union. We do know he photographed the headquarters, which is based in Norwich. We've got some women graduates here, which are quite interesting because we think they may be from the King's College Women's Department. We're not sure yet. We haven't found the plate, but that would be great to find out if we did. And on the other side, we've got Edward VII on horseback, because Knights-Whittome did photograph Edward VII in a variety of places. So, and we have hundreds of these images. This is actually the Royal Palace in Stockholm, I believe. And if we look on the other side, we can see a wedding portrait, and he's written Stockholm, so he often wrote on this side what was on that side. We've put notes in, as you can see, for some of them. And he's crossed this one off because this is the image he wanted to print it up. But the weddings are unknown, so until we come across the plates, and they're mostly large plates, but are unfortunately also the most damaged plates. Until we come across the plates, we won't know who they are. This is a particularly lovely one, this one. And we have several images of her and her groom, and the interior of a property, but we're not sure where it is. So that work is still to be done, the research into that.